All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our class on the as-is residential contract for sale and purchase. My name is Robert, of course, with Elite Ocean View Realty. Thank you so much for joining us. Today it's a class where we're going to discuss how to fill out correctly a purchase contract and the different documents that go together with a purchase contract, like the compensation agreement and other disclosures and addendums like the lead-based paint disclosure, or maybe an appraisal addendum, or any other addendum that we may use. Guys, if you have any questions, unmute yourselves, ask questions. You can also type your questions in the chat. We are recording our class and we will load this class up onto our YouTube channel so you can then rewatch it at a later time. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Of course, all the documents are inside of Form Simplicity, and I will be tapping into Form Simplicity in a little while to go ahead and show you where all the forms are located and how we can make them part of our transaction. But for now, I did pull up the actual purchase contract, which is the as-is residential contract for sale and purchase. This is the most up-to-date contract, and you can always look at the revision date to find out when was the latest revision. So for this one, the latest revision was just December of last year. So just a few months ago. All right, December of 24. Now, when you pull up the as-is purchase contract, this is the usual agreement that you will use to place an offer on a property. And I've prepared this contract for you, and I'm going to attach it also to our chat so you guys can download a copy. And I've in red pretty much pre-filled everything that needs to be filled out during a purchase situation. So let me go ahead and attach this file to the chat. All right, give me 1 second here. All right, so if you look inside of your chat, I just uploaded the PDF file, which is this as-is contract that you see here. Now, we may take classes with different instructors that cover the as-is contracts. Again, I am speaking on behalf of Elite Ocean View Realty. This is how we would like for you to fill out the as-is contracts. All right. So, beginning, of course, with line number one, that is the owner's name. Where can you find the owner's name? You'll find it in many public record systems like IMAP or Realist. Or you can go to the county clerk of office or property appraiser's office. And on the website, of course, you don't have to go physically. Go to their webpage and you can find out the owner's name. And then your buyer's name. So you're going to put in your full buyer's name, or if there are multiple buyers, of course, you're going to put in the multiple buyers' names. All right. So moving on down here to property description, the property address. Again, you can find that with your public records like IMAP or Realist, or your public records through the county. And right here, you're going to be placing the full parcel number. So the parcel number is that folio number that you see attached to the property, either again in one of the public record systems. Normally, you'll see the initials PID, that is parcel ID number. And then that's going to be followed by the full legal description. So we must place here, and we have plenty of space to put in the full legal description. All right. Then any personal property, all right? So we're going to look down here for letter D, and then any personal property items included in the purchase of this property are going to be included here. So personal property like appliances, right? Appliances. Now, a built-in piece of furniture, a built-in closet, or a built-in piece of furniture to the property is part of the property. So they're not going to be placing it here. Now, what is a personal property? Well, appliances could be personal properties. Also, let's say there's a hot tub in the backyard. It's a removable hot tub, right? It's not one that's built into the ground, but a removable hot tub. And it's going to be part of the sale. Then they're going to be placing it here under personal property. You're going to place it, right? You're going to say, hey, seller, is the hot tub also included? They're going to say yes. So you want to make sure that you place here the hot tub is included. All right, so all personal property. And then over here, line E, the following items are excluded from the purchase. So let's say there was a really nice statue or sculpture or something that is on the front lawn of the property, and the seller wishes to take that with them, then right here, the following items are excluded in the purchase. So you're gonna have to put in here that that statue or sculpture is not included in the sale. Okay. Right here, number two, purchase price. Of course, you're going to be putting here the offer price. This price is, of course, subject to change, right? So if the property is listed for $1 million and your client's offering $900,000, then you're going to place $900,000 here and initially submit the offer to the seller. If the seller comes back with a different price, maybe they come back with 950, they may come back with a strike through on this price and the new price of 950 um, as a counter offer. Usually what happens is that you submit an offer for $900,000. The seller will review it. They'll tell their agent, hey, let's counter offer 950. Before the listing agent sends you back the offer, they're probably going to call you and communicate with you and let you know that the seller has countered at 950, right? Because it makes no sense to do so many back and forth with a purchase contract. So they're going to say, hey, seller counters at 950. And then once the buyer and seller agree to a set price, and the seller will send you back the agreement with the agreed price. The earnest deposit, that's the initial deposit that must be given within a 3-day period. All right, we at Elite Ocean View Realty have built in the number three here. If you leave it blank, it does result to 3 days, and this is after the effective date. So if the contract is signed today, then day number one is tomorrow. Day number two is Wednesday. Sorry, day number one is tomorrow, which is Wednesday. Day number two, and then day number three would be Friday. All right. So 3 days to make the earnest deposit. Earnest deposit is going to be held by our title company, and we use Marina Title. It is built into our as-is contract. However, if your buyer has another title company or they wish to use another attorney, they can certainly do so. But with Elite Ocean View Realty, we are partnered up with Marina Title. And here is their address, phone number, and email address. All right, so that is built in right away to your as-is contract if you use our package. All right, so right here, line B or line 36 on the contract, the additional deposit to be delivered to the escrow agent within, we put here 12 days. If you leave it blank, it's 10 days. Now, the reason we put 12 days is because usually we have an inspection period of 10 days. So if the buyer is going to be submitting an additional deposit, we like that additional deposit to be initiated after the inspection period. So that's why we placed here 12 days rather than 10 days. And then, of course, you don't have to submit an additional deposit, right? Our deposit could have been $50,000 and there's no need for a secondary deposit. Then you don't have to fill out anything for second deposit. All right, so line 39 or letter C talks about the
I'm
amount
sorry.
that's
I'm
going to
so
be
sorry.
financed.
I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead, you have a question?
Yeah, can you go over the second deposit again? I feel like I just missed something because I'm not understanding.
So it's not always required and a second deposit. Uh,
Oh,
so let's say forget the $1 million. That's a little too high. Let's go with a $500,000 sale. Let's say our buyer wants to purchase a property for $500,000, and initially what you want to do is give a deposit of at least 2%. All right, it could be 2% or 1%, whatever they feel like it's a strong enough earnest deposit. then at that case, they don't have to give a second deposit because if they're already giving 1 or 2%, then they don't have to give an additional deposit. But let's say they're coming in with $5,000, right? They're buying a $500,000 home and they're coming in with $5,000. Well, the seller, in order to see this offer as a stronger offer, may want to have an additional deposit in escrow, showing good faith, number one, and that the buyer's also willing to risk the first and second deposit if anything goes wrong with the contract. So it would be 5,000 over here and maybe another 10,000 here for a total of $15,000 in deposit.
Got it. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
So you are probably not going to see many second deposits because everyone who's serious about buying a home, they'll probably come strong with like a $10,000 deposit, and that should be sufficient, right? I'm risking $10,000 in order to buy this property. But if they do come with like say an initial deposit of 5,000, they may be required to add another 5,000 in a second deposit. Okay. So letter C right here is financing. So the amount that's going to be financed. So if they are buying the property FHA and they're taking or they're putting down 3.5%, then right here you are going to be placing 96.5%. Once you place 96.5%, down here where it says due at closing, the math is going to be automatically done and the remaining balance is going to be placed. So if your purchase price is $500,000 and you're putting 3.5% down, right? And your deposit was $5,000, then the due at closing would be the remaining balance of that 3.5% that you're placing as a down payment. All right. That due at closing doesn't mean the entire $490,000 balance. It's just whatever the percentage of your down payment is. Okay, so does that make sense to you guys? Now, if it's a conventional loan, and let's say you're taking out a loan and you're financing 90%, then of course your down payment is 10%. So 10% of $500,000 would be your down payment, which is $50,000. And if you're giving $10,000 in deposit, your due at closing would be $40,000. And that would happen if you place your 10%, you place your finance 90%. Okay. Now, if your buyer's paying in cash, then you don't need to put in a percentage here. All right. And then due at closing would be the remaining balance. So if your buyer is paying in cash and they're putting $10,000 in deposit on a $500,000 sale, then here due at closing would be $490,000.
So I have a question about buyers who want to pay in solely cash. There has to be some recollection of where the money is coming from, correct?
Correct. So in most cases, the seller's going to want to see proof of funds, whether they have it in their bank accounts or they have it in investment accounts with access to the money. Sometimes, they need about 30 days to clear the money from their investment accounts. There must be some type of proof of funds that are going to be sent over with the offer. So we
Have
are
you,
buying $500,000 property and we are paying in cash. We need to demonstrate that we have access to $500,000.
okay, has there or have you ever encountered an instance where a seller would be okay with taking straight cash payments from the buyer without having any proof of where it's coming from? Or do you not just
Of
work with them
course.
at all?
Of course. I had it last year. Last year, I represented a buyer who was purchasing a condo or purchased because we closed the deal in Sunny Isles, and it was a $1.5 million condo. I never asked the buyer if he had the proof of funds. I assumed because he was a professional and owned his own business. And the seller never asked us for proof of funds either. They took the word. Now, the buyer did put $50,000 as a deposit. So that's really good earnest money, or that's really good, good faith money as a deposit that they're risking. So by putting $50,000 during the first 3 days, it gave the peace of mind to the seller, hey, this guy means business. He's risking $50,000. I'm sure he has the money.
Okay. Okay. That's understandable. I was just really curious because if you don't show that, like, can they come back and be like, oh, well, I didn't see any proof of where the money came from? Like, I'm just saying, like, a scenario. I just want to make, like, cover my bases as far as, like, if I was to deal with a buyer that wanted to pay solely cash and the seller was okay with it, but then later on, the seller is like, well, I didn't get any proof of anything. However, the deal did close already. So can they go back and try and,
No, the
I don't know, like,
seller, as long as the seller gets paid, if they're buying cash, if they're buying
mm-hmm.
cash, I mean, the buyer could collect money from their family to make this happen, if they're
Right.
buying in cash.
Yeah.
Now, if they're financing, the banks are going to want to see where the money's coming from. So
Got it.
if they're
Okay.
financing and they're putting $50,000 down, the bank is going to want to see where the $50,000 is coming from. If it's their own money, they need to have it in their possession. They're going to check. Okay. And let's say a close family member, like a father, mother, or brother, is going to gift them the money. They're gonna want to ask for a gift letter, like a letter that says, I, Robert Rodriguez, am gifting my son, a certain amount of money for the purchase of this property. Right? You can't just, as a buyer, all of a sudden go to the bank and deposit $50,000 in cash the day before the closing because there's going to be red flags. All right. So the banks, when they're in the approval process, they're going to be checking the buyer's funds and banks, and they're going to verify that the $50,000 needed to close on this property is already in their possession. And if it's being transferred from one account to the other, they're going to ask questions. Whose account is this? And what's the purpose of this transfer?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, so number three here, time for acceptance. This is the offer expiration date. As you guys know, we should not be placing multiple offers on different properties because what happens if two offers get accepted and now you're in a binding contract with two properties. So, in order for our buyer to not have to wait too much, we recommend 3 business days, right? 3 business days. So if we're placing our offer today, Tuesday, then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday would be our expiration date. Okay. Now, it doesn't have to be 3 business days. Let's say, you spoke to the seller's agent and the seller's agent says, my client is going to make a decision by Monday. Then you want to put your expiration date here, Monday of next week. All right. During this time, your buyer can see other properties. However, they cannot place an offer on another property, right? Because this one is still out there. Now, once the offer expiration or once the offer has reached the expiration date, okay, you are now free to go place offers on another property. However, if the seller comes back to you and says, hey, uh, my seller has accepted the deal or has accepted the offer, and you are past the expiration period, the offer that they accept, they need to change the expiration date and have it initialed by both sellers and buyers. So until this offer expiration date is not changed and initialed, you do not have a legal uh, contract or an executed agreement. All right. That's only if the offer is accepted after the expiration period. During the expiration period or before the expiration period, if the offer is accepted, you are now under contract. Any questions on that? Same thing for rentals, by the way. When we're submitting CTLs, contract to leases, There is an expiration period on the contract to lease. Unfortunately, we can't be placing multiple offers on multiple properties because what happens if, multiple properties accept your offer to lease the property? Now you're under contract with two properties. All right, so closing date should be anywhere between 30 and 45 days. So open up the calendar and choose your closing date. If it's let's say your buyer is fully approved, 100% no conditional. It's not a conditional approval, it's a fully 100% approval. Then you may want to place here 30 days. Of course, you can always ask for an extension if needed. But from my experience, anywhere between 30 and 45 days, we should be able to close on a transaction. All right, moving on down to financing. Under financing, check A if it's a cash purchase. So right here, this is a cash transaction with no financing contingency. And check B if we are going to be financing. Notice here contingent within 30 days. If you leave it in blank, it's 30 days. This 30 days means that this is your loan approval period. All right. So we're saying that our loan must be approved within that 30-day period. All right. Usually it takes between 20 and 30 days to get a loan approval. So we like to put the maximum 30 days. Then check whether it's going to be a conventional loan or FHA or other terms of financing. All right. What type of interest rate are we getting? It's usually going to be a fixed interest rate, right? And then right here, 30-year term. This is going to be a 30-year finance term. If your buyer's financing for 15 years, then you're going to want to change this to 15 years. And then right here, letter I. Buyer shall make application for financing within 5 days. If you leave it blank, it's within 5 days after the effective date. So let's stop right here. This is why it's extremely important to work with buyers that already have an approval letter. All right. You need to work with buyers that are already approved and they are shopping for homes that they can afford and that they can possibly get approved for their mortgage. Think about this. We can't just walk into a Ferrari dealer and ask to test drive a Ferrari and we cannot afford a Ferrari, right? They're not going to let us. Same thing with the home. We can't go shopping for $1 million house when we are not going to get approved for $1 million house. You are going to definitely go past that 5 day period for a loan application if you're not approved. So we need a loan application to be submitted within the first 5 days after the effective date. The best way to do that is to work with a buyer that is already approved. If a bank has already submitted an approval or a conditional approval, they have no issues getting a loan application started. Any questions on that? No, we're good. All right. Let's move on here. A lot of this here is going to be pretty much pre-filled for you. You can read on title and evidence insurance. Again, everything, if you leave it in blank, it results to a number. So this here says 15 days. All right, so cost to be paid by buyer, loan expenses, appraisal fees, buyer's inspection, buyer's attorney's fees, all property related insurance, owner's policy premium. All of this is cost to be paid by the buyer, cost to be paid by the seller, HOA, condominium association, estoppel fees, recording and other documents needed to cure the title, seller's attorney's fees, seller's closing services, and other. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to page number 5. At the bottom of page number 5, we have our inspection period. So number 12 here, or line 260, that's where the inspection period or the inspection, paragraph begins. So property inspections and right to cancel, buyer shall have 10 days. If you leave it blank, it does result to 15 days. Let me tell you that most sellers do not want to wait 15 days for an inspection period. In some cases, sellers are going to request that you do inspection in 7 days, right? Because during this time, the contract is at risk of falling through. So sellers are not going to want to wait 15 days, right, where the property is off the market to see if the property is actually going to sell or fall through. So during these 10 days, buyers shall have 10 days to perform an inspection on the property. All right. During this inspection, the property is going to, or the buyer is going to pay for it out of pocket. During this inspection period, if the buyer determines in the buyer's sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate this contract by delivering a written notice of such election to the seller prior to the expiration date of the inspection period. All right. For any reason, guys, for any, I mean, it could be a change of mind, a change of heart. It could be any reason. Just go ahead and submit a release and cancellation of the contract to the seller's agent so the seller can then present it to the seller and say, we have a canceled contract. They are within the inspection period. The seller is going to go ahead and sign it, and your contract is now finished. Now, during this time, the buyer should be performing an inspection, right? Hiring an inspection company, performing an inspection on the property, and determining whether the property is up to standards, if the property is, there's no major issues with the property, so they can continue with the purchase of the property. All right. Also, during this inspection period, after the inspection is performed, if there are major repairs needed, then this is time for you to consider renegotiating the purchase price or negotiating some type of seller's concession where the seller is going to credit the buyer at closing a certain dollar amount in order to make up for the, major improvements or, corrections to the damages of the property. What are some examples of major damages to a property? Someone? Can you guys fill me in here? What are some examples of major damages to the property?
Water damage, mold.
Water damage, mold. Yes, definitely.
I was honestly going to say like a leak, like a major leak within like the plumbing system or something.
Correct, right? Plumbing, windows, maybe roofing,
Mm-hmm.
electrical panel, foundation, right? These are all major, major issues. Now, if the tile is cracked, that's not going to be part of your negotiating. Like if the floors are cracked everywhere, like tiles are cracked everywhere, or there's holes on the drywall, those are not going to be major issues. If the door to a bedroom is missing, probably not going to be major issues. All right. But if the swimming pool has a leak, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the swimming pool needs to be completely resurfaced or redone, you may be able to negotiate a seller's credit. If like, the swimming pool pump is broken, right? And it's not working and the water is completely yellow or green, then again, those are credits that you may be able to ask.
Question, Robert.
Yes.
Even if let's say this if the pool is not working for a condominium, that still can be uh,
So in a
negotiated.
condominium, that is part of the association's responsibility. So no, no. This is for only the condo inside. So
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
in a condominium, the inspection is going to inspect the property inside and of course like the windows and the balcony. They're not going to inspect the swimming pool and like the grounds of the condominium.
Amenities, stuff like that. Okay,
Right.
okay. Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So once again, during this 10-day period, you have every right to pull out and receive your deposit back 100% of the time. All right, sellers know this, guys, buyers know this, you should know this too. Okay. So when you have that buyer that says, "Oh man, I don't want to lose my $10,000 deposit," and I'm like, "Buyer, don't worry, you have 10 days. We have 10 days to kind of figure this out." So, as a buyer's agent, the moment your contract gets accepted, please recommend a few inspection companies to your buyer. Have them schedule an inspection. Inspection, in my opinion, should be done within the first 3 days. So you have ample time to negotiate a credit if needed or make a decision. So have the inspection done within the first 3 days. And as a buyer's agent, plan to be there with your buyer. You want to witness the inspection as it occurs. And sometimes you can even talk to the inspector afterwards to get feedback on the property. Hey, is the plumbing okay? Is, the electrical panel okay? Is there anything that's major that you see here? All right, moving on through the contract, guys. A lot of this stuff is there for you to read, but a lot of this stuff is going to be pre-filled for you. And we're going to move on down here to this page. All right, and this page here is, I always lose a page. This is page number 13. All right, so you're going to place a check mark next to each addendum or disclosure that's going to be included with your purchase agreement. So if this property Now, the purchase agreement is the first thing you're going to send, right? This is the offer. Once it gets accepted, then there's going to be other addendums that and disclosures that may be needed. All right. Now, you're going to place a check mark next to each disclosure or addendum that's also going to be submitted with the purchase agreement. Now, checking these off is not sufficient. You also need to go to Form Simplicity and prepare it, and then have it signed by your buyer and then eventually signed by the seller. The one disclosure that well, actually two, the two disclosures that the seller is going to give your buyer is going to be the seller's property disclosure and the flood disclosure. The flood disclosure is a new disclosure that is now required to be given by the seller, letting the buyer know that you are in a flood zone. All right. There's been many, many different instances where buyers are under contract or buyers even close on a property without knowing that the property is in a flood zone. All right. So, seller's disclosure is to be provided by the seller to the buyer. And that's a disclosure that it's like a checklist where the seller is going to say, is there anything wrong with the property? And there's a huge checklist, and they're going to say yes, no, or I don't know. And that's going to be filled out by the seller to be given to the buyer so the buyer can review it and then sign off on it. And then the flood disclosure, which is a new disclosure, will also be given by the seller to your buyer, letting you know that the property is in a flood zone. Now, the property was built before 1978, right? The year 1978 or prior, then the property is subject to lead-based paint. So a lead-based paint disclosure is going to be also needed. And here it is, the lead-based paint disclosure. Either the buyer can prepare it or the seller can prepare it, but both need to sign it. And the seller is usually going to return the lead-based paint disclosure saying, I am not aware of any lead-based paint hazards. All right, so they're basically going to say, I don't know, I'm not aware. And then the buyer is going to sign it saying, I acknowledge receipt of the lead-based paint disclosure by the seller. If you are purchasing a property that's a condo, then a condominium rider will be required as part of the purchase agreement. So you're going to check condo rider. If you're purchasing a property inside of an HOA, a homeowners association, then the homeowners association addendum will be also required. Okay. If you are purchasing a property that is contingent to an appraisal. So let's talk about that. Somewhere along the way, an appraisal is going to be performed by the lender, right? And this is going to be paid by the buyer out of pocket. So the buyer is going to pay for the inspection out of pocket, usually around $300 to $400. And the buyer is also going to be paying for an appraisal. The appraisal is usually around $500, and they're going to have to pay it up front. Some lending institutions will build it right into the closing costs. So if the property contract or the purchase contract is subject to appraisal, meaning that this purchase price of $500,000 is valid and it is contingent on the property appraising at $500,000, then you're going to check this here and you're going to go to Form Simplicity and you're going to include an appraisal contingency. Let me tell you that that is going to make your offer a lot weaker if you're submitting an offer with an appraisal contingency. Now, if you are purchasing FHA, right? If your buyer is using an FHA loan, then an appraisal is part of the purchase procedure. So you don't need to submit an appraisal contingency for FHA loans. Part of the process from the lender is to always run an appraisal on the property when it is purchased using FHA. And of course, the property must appraise at the purchase price or near the purchase price in order for the loan to go through. Now, if you are purchasing using FHA, you're going to also include the FHA financing addendum. That's this one right here. Okay. Any other questions on these disclosures and addendums that you see here? You're going to check them off. And then, of course, you need to include them. Also, there's one right here, guys, licensee property interest. So if you are purchasing the property from the seller and the seller is representing themselves, or if you are representing a family member and or you yourself are buying the property, you need to also add a disclosure that says licensee has property interests. All right, so part of the additional terms right here is that the buyer will pay a $495 transaction broker fee at closing to the Elite Ocean View Realty. And then seller shall close any open or expired permits or code violations against the subject property at seller's sole cost prior to closing. This provision shall supersede paragraph 12C of the contract. So if you go to 12C, all right, let's go here to 12, and then let's go to 12C. All right, so here it is, 12, and then C, seller assistance and cooperation in closeout of the building permits. If buyer's inspection of the property identifies open or needed building permits, the seller shall promptly deliver the buyers all plans and written documentation. This entire paragraph, all right, will be crossed out because in the additional terms, we made sure. Now, the seller may come back and say, we don't agree with this term, right? But here it says, seller shall close out any open or expired permits or code violations against the subject at seller's sole cost prior to closing. All right. Sometimes the sellers are not going to agree on that, and the buyer needs to know that they are going to be purchasing a property that has open permits, and now it is the buyer's responsibility to close out those open permits or violations. All right, but we are protecting you and your buyer by placing this here in the additional terms. You guys will see. You guys will see once you place an offer and this becomes a question. It's time to decide whether the buyer wants to assume a property with violations or not. Write any additional terms to the contract here. There may be additional terms like, you know, buyer agrees to purchase the property if seller uh fixes the swimming pool, right? The swimming pool needs to be fixed. However, we need to write it on the additional terms. Any questions on additional terms? Nope.
No.
Perfect. All right, guys. So the last here is signatures. Of course, your buyer signatures, your seller signatures. We as agents do not sign the purchase agreement. There are other disclosures that we as agents will sign. However, the actual purchase contract, we will not sign it. Guys, make sure that each page is also initialed by your buyers, right? So the last page is for signatures, but the every single page there are spaces for buyers' initials. You know, when you guys use Form Simplicity and you use e-sign, the spaces for initials for the buyers will automatically light up. So you should not struggle with this at all. All right, so this is your as-is purchase and sales contract. Pretty simple. Go ahead and have it filled out and send it over as an offer to the listing agent. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and log into Form Simplicity real quick here. All right, so you're also going to ask, right, the listing agent if the seller is paying any type of compensation to the buyer's agent. And if the seller says, yes, we're paying 2% compensation to the buyer's agent, then we want to go to Form Simplicity and you want to go to the blank forms. And you can either look for it in the blank forms or go to our buyer package. You'll see it in there. All right. So you can go to our forms packages and you can click on the buyer package. And you're going to find the compensation agreement seller to buyer broker, right? Compensation agreement seller to buyer broker. That means the seller agrees to pay the buyer broker a compensation. There's another one here called compensation agreement seller's broker to buyer's broker, but we don't want to put that burden on the seller's broker. All right, we want the compensation to be paid directly from the seller at closing. So sellers to buyer broker. We need to submit this one as well with our offer. We've already talked to the listing agent. The listing agent says the seller is compensating 2%. So we need to prepare the compensation agreement, sellers to buyer broker, stating that the seller is going to pay 2% compensation to the buying broker. Guys, as you get ready for closing, we need to submit the exclusive buyer broker agreement to the title company, and we need to submit the compensation agreement to the title company. The title needs to know who is paying our commission. So if you agreed with the buyer in your buyer broker agreement for a total of 3% to be compensated to you, and the seller's compensating 2%, then the title company needs to know that 1% of the purchase price is going to be added on to the closing cost for the buyer, right? The buyer's going to have to come up with an additional 1% to pay you. If you forget to submit either the compensation agreement or the buyer broker agreement, you may not get paid. All right, it's very important. I've already seen it. I've already seen it where in that instance, right, that example, the seller was compensating something and the buyer was going to compensate something. Well, that what happened was that the buyer broker agreement was not sent to the title company and the seller had promised to pay 1%. So guess what the buyer agent made on that transaction?
1%.
Exactly. 1%. She was like, how come I'm getting paid so little? Like, how come Elite Ocean View Realty is getting paid so little? And I go, well, did you have any agreement with your buyer that they would pay you a percentage? And she says, yes. I go, did you send that agreement to the title company? Like, did you alert the title company that they need to add the additional, remaining percentages as closing costs? And she goes, no. And I go, well, you just worked for free for your buyer. And of course, the transaction was closed and everyone got paid, right? Like the money was transferred over to the seller, and there was nothing we can do at this point. I mean, how are you gonna go back to your buyer and say, hey, you owe me $10,000? That was an unfortunate situation. All right, so very important. Submit the compensation agreement to the title company together with your buyer broker agreement. All right. Now the compensation agreement is 3%, like the seller agrees to pay you 3%, and that's how much you are entitled to make in this transaction, then that's fine. Just go ahead and submit the compensation agreement because the seller agrees to pay you your full 3%. Okay. You are sometimes going to need an addendum to a contract. So the addendum to a contract is inside of your buyer's package. And I'm going to show you what the addendum looks like. I'll show you other disclosures that you see here. All right. So I'm going to go here to the forms library. And I'm going to pull up here the addendum. So actually, I don't have to look for it. It's the first one. See here? It's in alphabetical order. So let's go here and let's open it up. Once you are under contract, the best way to make changes to a contract is going to be with an addendum. This is why it says addendum number, because you may have 10 addendums to the contract. So you're going to number your addendums. So this is the first addendum, you go one. All right, you can tell by my computer and my system, I've done up to 6 addendums in a contract. All right. So every time I fill in a number here, it writes it here, right? It's like it's available on a drop down. That's through, I don't know, cookies or something on my computer. So addendum number one of the effective date. So the contract was signed, let's say yesterday, Monday, then it's February 10th, right? Always know your effective date when the contract was executed. All right. And then, of course, seller's name, buyer's name, property address. And then what are the changes, right? You're going to write it here. So the changes are that a seller is going to contribute $10,000 towards closing costs. You're going to write here, seller will contribute $10,000 towards the buyer's closing costs. And then always end your addendum like this. All other terms and conditions of this contract remain the same. Always end it like this. So basically, this is like your ending statement, right? All other terms and conditions of this contract remain the same. Save it, have the buyer sign it, submit it over to the listing agent, have the seller sign it. Now you have a legal change to the contract. Okay, any addendums, if we need to extend the inspection period, then you're gonna put here seller and buyer agree to extend the inspection period to say February 20th. Or seller and buyer agree to extend the closing date to March 30th. All right. Any changes to the contract will be done with an addendum. Any questions on addendums? Nope. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close that out without saving, of course. Close without saving. Let's take a look at the lead-based paint disclosure. All right, so let's go here, and I'm just gonna pull up the lead base.
I have a question
Sure.
about the addendum. So you use that anytime, like no matter what the change is, you're using the addendum to the contract.
Yes, it's much neater than having to pull up the original contract and make changes and have initials and everything else. So leave the original purchase and sale contract as is and just use addendums to make changes.
As far as even the counter offers and everything like that, because I remember on the counter offers you had said for like
Yeah,
the
no, the counter offer, no, because we haven't had a fully executed agreement yet. Once the agreement is fully executed, then you're going to make changes an addendum. But if we
okay.
haven't agreed on a price yet and we're going back and forth with pricing, you don't do that with addendums because the contract itself is not fully final.
Okay, so once it's fully executed, then you would
Yes,
use addendum.
with the
Okay.
addendums. Yes. All right, guys. So I'm gonna just open up the lead-based paint disclosure. Once again, the seller's gonna prepare this for you. However, sometimes you will prepare it. All right, and then basically the seller's name, the buyer's name, the property address, initials by the buyer, initials by the seller, and then a little explanation on the pre-1978 housing, and then here the seller's initials. Normally, they are going to initial letter B, right? And in letter B, they're gonna go ahead. Sorry, they're gonna initial letter A and B, but for letter A, they're gonna, in most cases, say seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint disclosure, not disclosure, but lead-based paint hazards in the housing. And then for letter B, they're gonna do the second option as well. Seller has no reports or records pertaining to lead-based paint hazards in the housing. Now, if they're answering truthfully and they know that a lead-based paint was used in the house, then of course they're going to say known lead-based paint in the property is present. How would someone know that? I mean, if the seller purchased a home in the year 2000, but the home was built in 1950, how would they know that, you know, in 1955 they painted the house with paint that contained lead? They're not going to know. So they're usually going to go ahead and say they have no knowledge. And then, of course, the buyer is going to go ahead and initial that they have received all the copies, that they have received the pamphlet, and that they received the 10-day opportunity, or mutually agreed upon period to conduct a risk management or inspection on the property. All right, the licensee, which is you are going to initial here. Licensee has informed the seller of the seller's obligation. Actually, the seller's licensee, so the listing agent is going to initial here. All right, the seller is going to sign, the listing agent is going to sign, the buyers are going to sign, and you, the buyer's agent, you're going to sign here where it says selling licensee. That's your lead-based paint disclosure. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Let's take a look at the appraisal contingency. All right. So let's search for appraisal and let's take a look at the appraisal contingency. You're using the one that says FAR bar, right? CR7 appraisal contingency. It's the one that says Florida bar. All right, open that. Once again, submitting an offer, a conventional loan offer with an appraisal contingency is a weaker offer, right? Like you're telling the seller, hey, I'll buy your house if it appraises. No, no, no. But go ahead and purchase the property, run your comps, and come up with the proper purchase price without an appraisal contingency. But anyways, here's the appraisal contingency, and the appraisal shall be done no later than, let's say, March 1st, right? And it should appraise at $500,000. I mean, if your purchase price is $500,000, then it should appraise at $500,000. That's it. That's your appraisal contingency. Have the buyers initial it and the sellers initial it. Any questions on this? And do you understand why it makes your offer weaker by submitting an appraisal contingency?
Explain why that happens as far as it, because I know with the FHA, they give you the appraisal with the FHA loan. However, I'm not really understanding why it would weaken the.
Well, in a conventional loan is different. See, on an FHA loan, it's automatic. Every lender using FHA is going to be, or every buyer using FHA is going to be required to have an appraisal done, and it needs to be contingent on that price. FHA is not going to let you buy a property over appraised value. But in a conventional loan, you know, if you place an offer for $500,000 and the property appraises at 480, you are responsible for coming up with the additional $20,000 out of pocket, right? Or negotiate something with the seller to meet halfway. Why does it make it weaker? Because there are many people out there that don't really care with the appraised price. They want the property and they're going to submit full price offers and they want the property. And no matter what it appraises, they are willing to pay the $500,000. So by submitting a contingency like this, it's giving doubt to the seller. Hey, I don't think I'm getting the full $500,000 because what if it appraises at 480 and they want to back out?
Okay,
Yep.
got it.
That's what the contingency is, contingent on an appraised value of $500,000. So with this, it gives the buyer the right to back out if it does not appraise at $500,000. So that's why it makes it a weaker offer.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. You have no choice in an FHA. FHA will not loan the money if it doesn't appraise. So there's no, like, there's no getting around that. Okay.
And you
I
don't
mean,
need to.
there is. If you're working with a buyer who's getting a FHA loan, there is ways around it. It's just gonna possibly cost more money to the buyer out of pocket. Like if there's a $10,000 difference, the property does not appraise. There's a $10,000 difference. You can either do one of many things. You can negotiate with the seller to drop the price to the appraised value, or you can negotiate with the seller to meet halfway. Let's say they got to make up the difference and the seller's willing to drop $5,000 of their purchase price and the buyer's willing to up their purchase price by $5,000 and go out of pocket, or they will eventually just walk away from the deal. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So the appraisal contingency wouldn't be a necessity if they had a FHA loan, but if they had a conventional loan, you would need to put the appraisal contingency in.
Correct. Correct. If it's an FHA, which I'm going to get to the next documents, FHA financing, it's built into the FHA contract. It's built in. Like there's the contingency is built in. All right. So the only time that you really have to alert a seller that we're buying with a contingency to the appraisal is in a conventional loan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Of course, as the listing agent and seller's agent, you need to let the seller, be aware. Hey, look, we're looking at it. We're considering accepting an FHA offer, but know that it is subject to appraisal. You know. Anyways, I've heard a lot from different sellers that sellers prefer to accept FHA loans, FHA offers. All right, they're fully protected on that price. All right, one last one is going to be the FHA, right? So FHA, let's go ahead and spell it out here. Let's look for it. And once again, it's the one that says Florida Bar, right? FHA Florida Bar. It's this one right here. Now, you don't really have to submit this if you are checking in the financing terms in the contract, um FHA, it automatically kicks in, so you don't really have to submit this, but in most cases they're going to ask you, the title company is going to ask you. So go ahead and prepare this. Once again, buyer's initials, seller's initials. The purchase price is $500,000, so we need this to appraise to $500,000. All right. Check if applicable FHA financing. Any questions? It's very simple. Have it, everyone sign it, and now you have the FHA addendum signed.
Is there any instance where with the FHA, I know they have their own appraisal and everything like that, but let's just say maybe the seller had his had an appraiser as well, and it came up with two different prices. Was that Lola? Has that ever occurred, or
See, the
have
thing
you ever?
you need to understand with FHA appraisals is that, let's say this house is for sale at $500,000 and the appraisal comes back at 450. Now, any offer that is FHA that comes to the seller needs to be at 450 or lower, because it now sticks for 90 days, where any buyer, let's say the buyer backs out, right? 450 was just too low. And or sorry, the seller backs out, says, 450 is too low. I do not accept 450. The buyer has every right to back out. They back out. Now the seller accepts another offer with FHA. It's gonna be 450, right? It's gonna be 450. So Um, in most cases, when a deal falls through because of FHA contingency on the appraisal, then the seller stops accepting FHA loans and they go conventional or cash only. So it's only for a period of 90 days, but that is valid.
Okay, no problem.
Yep. All right, let's close this out, guys. And I promised that that would be the last one, but I actually want to just cover one more, and that's you're going to be your condo writer. All right, so let me just go ahead and spell here the word writer. And it's the condominium writer right here. And if you're buying a property that is a condo, this needs to be included. It will talk about the monthly fees and if there's any assessments as well. So, you're going to talk to the listing agent. You're going to find out what the monthly fees are. All right, so fees, assessments, and prorations. So what are the monthly fees? Payable monthly. All right, if there's any assessments, payable monthly, you're gonna place them here. Make sure that everyone agrees on this and have it signed by both. It's not signed, have it initialed by both buyers and sellers. Okay, this is gonna be part of the purchase agreement to a condo. All right, guys. Same thing with the HOA, by the way. That this is for a condo writer, but there's another one for HOA, which is the homeowners association. All right, disclosure. So you can just come over here and type in homeowners, and here it is, homeowners association, community disclosure, and it's the same thing. It's going to talk about what are the monthly fees to the HOA. All right, guys. So we went over the as-is contract, the purchase and sales agreement. We went over some addendums, some disclosures. These are all part of what it takes to place an offer on a property. So review these documents, make sure that you know what they're for and how they're used. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always go back to the video. I will upload this video right away to our YouTube channel so you guys can rewatch it. And also, if you have any questions, you just make sure you reach out to me or Teo, and we are going to respond to all of your questions. All right, guys?
Thank you.
Perfect. No, thank you guys for joining. It was a great Great class with lots of information. We hope that you guys find it useful and helpful when placing your next offer.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.